Welcome to Bibliophiles Anonymous, episode 26. I'm Denise.
And I'm Jess.
And today we're talking about the latest book club book over at the Mallorean Tavern, Rhapsody by Elizabeth Hayden. And if you would like to go visit the tavern, we have a discussion thread set up, and we've already started talking about it. You can find us at www.maltavern.com. And we already have a couple people talking about it. So if you haven't read the book yet, go ahead and get started, because it's a fairly long book, which I didn't quite realize that when I started reading it. And so, to be completely honest, I haven't quite finished it yet. But
yeah, it's 658 pages or so.
Yeah, and I'm on 582. So
well, you're almost there.
I'm getting there, and I'll probably finish it later tonight or possibly tomorrow morning. But yeah, I didn't schedule enough time to read it when I finally got around to starting it, and I'm paying for it now. But yeah, I should have started.
Well, I finished it and I started book 2, and book 2 is even longer. Book 2 is 698 pages. I think that's actually the book. There's like 700 and something, but it's got I think the first chapter of the third book at the end of it. So only like 698 pages of it are actually the book. But
right.
It could hurt somebody if you threw it at them.
That's how we decide how big our books are. It can hurt somebody if we throw it at them.
Yeah.
Well, we talk about the books that we're currently reading, but I have been trying to focus all of my attention on this book. I haven't really been reading anything else.
Well, I haven't really either until I finished that, and I started Prophecy, which is the second book in the series, and I have Pawn of Prophecy laying here so I can read it before we start Eddings-palooza.
Right, which starts next week.
Yes.
So, yeah, just a reminder to everybody, we are starting our celebration of David Eddings and the Belgariad, celebrating the 31st anniversary of the first book, Pawn of Prophecy. So we will discuss that book next week. So
yes.
Be sure to join us.
And I think
we're
going to have a guest next week, too.
Oh, good. Good.
I think Marita is going to play with us.
Yay! That'll be fun.
Yeah, she was going to do it because I forgot all about Rhapsody, and that we were going to do an episode on Rhapsody, and I said that we were going to record, the Eddings episode last night, and then I went back and I was like, wait, I'm an idiot, we're not doing Eddings till next week, and she's like, good, because I can't find my microphone.
Well, that'll be fun.
So I'm like, okay, you have a week to find a microphone, and then you can play with us.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not reading anything else, but I need to probably start Pawn of Prophecy. That one won't take me long, though.
No.
Number 1, it's shorter. Number 2, I'm familiar with it, so it's really more just remembering everything.
A refresher.
Yeah, because it's been a little while since I've read them. I think I might have read them last year. I can't remember now.
I read them year before last, but I've read them so many times like you that it's just basically just a refresher kind of thing.
Well, for me, it's that all of the books kind of run together.
Yeah.
So I need to remember what happens in Pawn of Prophecy so that it doesn't, I'm not all over the place trying to remember, okay, no, that was in the second book, or this was in whatever. I just need to remember where one, starts and stops.
Yeah, that's kind of basically why I'm rereading it, so that I will know what part of the story we're meant to be discussing, because in my head it's just one story.
Yeah. But I'm actually glad that I'll be finished with Rhapsody, because I have got such a stack of books sitting over on my desk that I need to read. And this is not counting the library books that I finally took back. Yeah. And several of them are ones that I have really been looking forward to reading, and I've really, 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 really wanted to start, but I just haven't had a chance to, because I've been trying to cram this thing down.
Yeah.
But, oh well, I'll get to the
So that was me. I was like, I'm not going to start anything else until I finish Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Because I've got to finish Rhapsody. And if I start anything else, I'm just going to be like, yeah, I don't really want to read that anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's the sad thing, because there's so many books over here that I really, 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 really want to read. Like, I have the second book in the Shades of London series by Maureen Johnson. That's the one that I went over to Raleigh to get it signed at the book signing. And so I have book two. That's the one that just came out. But I need to reread book one because I don't remember enough about what happened in it. And I just remember I really liked it. And
Yeah.
so I need to reread book one and then move on to book two because I have been told and warned that something really, really drastic happens at the end of book two.
Oh.
And the sad thing is that my mother has read these before I did because she went with me to the book signing and she didn't really know anything about Maureen Johnson at all.
Yeah.
She was just going with me kind of along for the ride sort of thing. And so she was like, "Oh, I really want to read her books because she's a lot of fun." I said, "Okay." So I gave her the first book and she read it in like 2 days. And then she wanted to go ahead and read the second one, and I was nowhere near ready to read it, so I let her borrow it. And so she was like, "Yeah, you're gonna need to be sitting down when you finish that one because oh my goodness." So it's like this isn't fair. Like this is one of my favorite authors, and my mom knows the big secret reveal whatever at the end of the book, and I don't. That's
Yeah,
driving
that
me
would kind of
crazy.
suck.
So I need to get caught up on all of my reading so I can get started on those. And
Yeah, I've got to really buckle down and do better with my whole read things I own but I've never read because I'm failing miserably at it so far because I keep reading things I own that I've read before.
yeah.
So I've really got to work on that. I'm even behind on my goal of reading 60 books this year.
Well, I have 7 books sitting in a stack on my desk, and those are the next ones that I'm reading eventually. I don't know when it's going to happen. But
One day.
yeah, well, let's see. I've got The Name of the Star and The Madness Underneath, both by Maureen Johnson. I have Lola and the Boy Next Door by Stephanie Perkins. I have Fire by Kristen Cashore that I had found at that funny little store for like
Yeah, that one's on my
$2.
shelf and that's one of the ones that I own and need to read.
And then I have
Maybe I'll do that.
And then I have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which I have been wanting to read for the longest time. I put it on my list of things I wanted for Christmas, and I got it for Christmas. Have I read it yet? No.
It's so good.
I want to. It's on my stack of books to read. And then I have Scarlet by A.C. Coffin, or I don't know. No, it's Gaughen. I'm not familiar with this author, but I got this book recommended to me from somewhere. I don't even remember where now, but I found it at the used bookstore for like $3 or something, so I grabbed it.
Yeah, of course. You find cheap books, you buy them.
Yeah, and then I have Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, which is also sitting over here. So that's coming up next if I ever finish everything else. And I have to dig Pawn of Prophecy out. It's somewhere. I know it's in there somewhere.
Well, like I said, since I got my books reshelved, it helped.
Mm.
So I got Pawn of Prophecy when I got Prophecy. That's gonna get confusing.
Pawn of
I'm reading
Prophecy
Prophecies and Prophecy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be a problem.
And I haven't started it yet, but like I said, I'm not really worried about that one. If nothing else, I can just breeze through it, glance through it, and just make sure I know where the ending of that, and don't talk about stuff that happens in the later books.
Right.
So, but yeah, I don't know. I'm probably gonna finish the Symphony of Ages series, the Elizabeth Hayden books. I will go ahead and warn everybody now. This series is not complete, which has been a source of much annoyance for me. A friend of mine got me to read these, and I read them all years ago. Like, when I read them, The Assassin King, which is the 6th book, had just came out. So I knew it was an unfinished series, but I had no idea that it was never going to be finished.
Right.
So I read them all, and that was I think Assassin King came out in 2006. Here it is 2013, and she hasn't written any more books.
Ugh.
And I have Googled, like, her website is gone. She did, after Assassin King, she wrote 3 young adult books that are kind of companions to the Symphony of Ages. They're set in the same universe, about a character that is mentioned in the series that lived in Sarandare before Rhapsody was ever born. And she wrote those, and I thought, oh, well, she's just going to take a break from these, and she's going to write those. Well, she was supposed to write 4 of those. She only wrote 3 of them. I have them. My copy of the third book says, coming soon, book 4. Book 4 never happened. And the last two, like, the Assassin King was supposed to be the first book in a new trilogy. She never wrote the other 2. Her website is gone. There's no information about it on the internet anywhere. I have Googled. The last thing I found was a post on a message board that was sometime in late 2012 that said she was still writing and she was going to finish the series. But that's it. That's just, somebody posted that on a message board. So I have no idea who it was or if they even know what they're talking about.
Right. That's really weird.
If anybody out there knows anything about Elizabeth Hayden and why she hasn't finished this series, please email us and let us know.
Yes. Because that's just weird. It's like she's dropped off the face of the earth.
She evaporated. I don't know what happened.
She went into the tree.
That's it. She went into the tree.
Well, let's go ahead and get started talking about her book then. Because I've got to tell you, I had a really hard time with this one.
Yeah,
I don't know whether it's just because I have this other stack of books that's like glaring at me from the other side of my desk, or if it's just that I was not in the mood for this kind of book, or what it was, but I had a terrible time keeping up with it at times. I had a hard time keeping track of things that were happening, and
yeah.
I'm just going to come out and say the beginning of this book is confusing as all get out.
It really is. I had forgotten, probably because it's been, 7 years since I read them. I had forgotten about how slow it starts off, how boring it is once they get into the tree, and how much stuff she throws at you in this first book that she's not going to explain until book 2 or 3. I had completely forgotten about that. And it starts off, you meet Meridian. He's a time editor, which is an interesting concept in a fantasy book.
Right.
It's that's more like a science fiction-y kind of concept because he's got this machine and time is running through it like film, which is kind of a cool concept.
Yeah, I liked that. That was neat.
And you don't really know anything about Meridian other than he's a time editor.
Mm-hmm.
I know who Meridian really is because I've read the entire series, and let me just tell you, that one shocked me. But anyway, he takes a guy and sends him back in time, and he coats his eyes with this liquid that was like something of true sight so he could see things for what they really were. And he sends him back in time, and he meets this girl named Emily. And completely unrealistically, they fall in love and decide that they're soulmates in a day.
Less than that.
Yeah. So she ends up, they're like 14 and 15 years old at this time. And they end up sleeping together, and then he gets jerked back to his own time. And then you switch from this scene that takes place about Emily and Sam, you switch to Rhapsody.
Yes.
She's a Lyran, and the Lyran, I always sort of figured that they were basically elves.
Yeah, that's kind of the impression that I got.
Because, they bear a very, very strong resemblance to elves,
Mm-hmm.
And she is a singer. And she's one of the most powerful kinds of singers. She's a namer. Which means that if she knows the true name of something, she can change its nature.
Right.
Knowing the power of a true name, that's something that's fairly common throughout all fantasy literature.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that trope is used. And I know it's used like with fairies. Like if you know their true name, then you can exert some kind of control over them or stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, and even in the Belgariad, when Polgara learns Xandramus's name, she says, apparently you don't know the power of the name.
Right.
And at the beginning, when they're chasing the apostate, they don't want to tell anybody his name because they say if you speak his name, then he knows you're talking about him, whatever. It's common.
Right.
But it's a little bit different with what Elizabeth Hayden does with it because these namers, when you really see the power she has, the naming ability, she meets these two in an alleyway when she's being chased by the guards, and she asks them if they will adopt her for a moment. And they say yeah, for some stupid reason. So when the guards show up, she tells them you're just in time to meet my brother, Ahmed the Snake. Well, this person that she introduced that way, his name was the brother. And he was in thrall to a demon. And when she changed his name, because she's a namer, because she has this ability, because she broke the thrall the demon had over him, because the demon had this power, because the demon had his true name. So that's the first sort of example of what her naming ability can do. It can do a lot more than that, but
Right. And it was, I really liked that part. I thought that was funny because, well, the man that we now know as Ahmed, we never learned what his real name is, do we?
not in
Or
this
his
book.
first name? But,
No, he didn't really have a name. The brother was his name.
okay. Well, I meant the name that the demon had.
Oh, I think we
Control
learned
of.
later on, maybe. I don't remember. Like I said, it's been a long time since I read them, but I think maybe
Okay.
later on we might.
Okay. I was curious about that for a good long while, actually.
Yeah.
But just the fact that she just says it, will you guys adopt me? And they're like, okay, sure, having no idea what that's going to entail, and instead it turned out changing their entire lives.
Yeah. Because you don't know it until later on, but Ahmed panics, and he asks her, he's like, who are you? How did you know my name? How did you know I was the brother? And and Rhapsody's just like, what are you talking about?
She's like, I just said you were my brother. That's it. Now, what do you...
She's like, I asked if you would adopt me so I could claim you as my brother because I'm a namer and we can't lie.
Right. But this is going to lead a little bit into one of my first complaints about the book. And that is too many villains.
Yeah, there is an awful lot of them.
And because usually with a fantasy story, you have, the one big bad guy, and then a couple of, like, subordinate bad guys, and then, the mindless hordes or whatever. Like in Lord of the Rings, you have Sauron. And in the Belgariad, you have Torak. In Harry Potter, you have Voldemort. And then they have their various underlings. Well, this one, you start off with Rhapsody trying to get away from this man, and I can't remember what his real name is now, but they kept calling him the Waste of Breath.
Michael, Wind of Death.
Okay, yes. Number one, I still have no idea who he is, or even if he's important.
Not really.
Okay. But because that was why she was trying to get away from the guards, because this man had basically become obsessed with Rhapsody back when for a while she was a prostitute. And he became just obsessed with her and was trying to claim her even though she was no longer in that line of work. Right. And she kept telling them that, and he basically didn't care. But so she's trying to get away from his people, and his people had kind of paid off the guard, and that's how all of that happened. Then you have the demon that, Ahmed was sold to.
Yeah.
And then you have just a whole bunch of other ones, and it was hard for me to keep track of who was fighting with who. It was just like and they weren't connected at all. Or most of them weren't. Or maybe they will be later, but it was...
They are...
To me, it was very confusing.
Well, okay, the Fedor Sultan, the demon that Ahmed was originally enthralled to.
Yes.
That's the big bad.
Okay.
That's your most evil. Michael was basically one of his henchmen.
Okay. Didn't get that.
It's not explained really well, but that's essentially, and see, once they go through the tree, okay, when Ahmed and Grunthor, I love Grunthor, by the way. Of course,
Grunthor is my favorite character.
I like Ahmed too, because a lot of the stuff that Ahmed says reminds me of things that I would say.
He's very snarky.
And very dry.
Yes.
And, anyway, Grunthor, when they adopt her, they take her with them. They tell her that they're going to the Lyran Forest to see the Great Tree. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go with you, at least till there. What they fail to tell her is that they're going inside the tree.
And we should mention real quick that While Rhapsody is, I think she's half Lyran, right?
Yes.
She's half
Her
human,
mother
half
was.
Lyran. Ahmed and Grunthor are not human either. They
No.
are both Firbolg.
Yeah.
Which,
Well, they're both half.
oh, they're both half Firbolg. Okay. And so they're kind of, well, Grunthor at least, he looks basically like a monster. He's 7 or 8 feet tall. Has a very fierce appearance. But the thing that makes Grunthor just wonderful is that he's also basically this big teddy bear.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, you know, and because there was a couple of times when they were inside the tree that that Rhapsody was having trouble with nightmares. In fact, I think it was most of the time while they were in the tree.
Yes.
That she kept having nightmares, and so basically it was just so sweet. Grunthor would bring her over to where he was sleeping and kind of let her like lay on his chest so that she would be comforted that even if she woke up with a nightmare, she would be with somebody and it would be okay. And I was just like, that's so sweet.
Even though he keeps making fun of her and telling her that he's going to eat her.
Yeah.
Because apparently the Firbolg eat Lyran.
I think they probably eat just about anything.
Well, yeah, that's true. But yeah, Grunthor is half Firbolg and half Bengard. And Ahmed is he's kind of creepy looking. They talk about his face being pockmarked and uneven and his eyes don't match, and you can see the veins under his skin. And that comes from his Dracian heritage, which he can feel vibrations on his skin. And that's why he stays wrapped up most of the time.
Yeah, he usually has some kind of a veil or something across his face so you can't see what he looks like. And most of the time I didn't even pay attention to what he looked like, even though they mentioned him being kind of fearsome looking.
And he's also, as the brother, he was the first of his race, first Dracian that was born on Serendare. So that gave him a tie to everyone on the island. He could hear their heartbeats. He was an assassin, and that's how he tracked his targets, is he could sense their heartbeats, and he could follow them.
Right.
Well, she falls in with these two, and they tell her they're going to see the Great Oak. And she agrees to go along, but they fail to mention to her that they're going inside the tree, and they're going to be crawling along the roots because they're trying to escape this demon that had Ahmed in thrall. And that's when Rhapsody starts getting a little petulant.
A little?
When they bring her... Okay, a lot. They get her in the tree, and she has a hissy fit, and she's all, let me out, I don't want to go, yada, yada, yada. And she really basically doesn't have a choice.
Well, okay, granted, she started getting a little annoying at that point, but they were also making her do something that all of her life she has felt was just the epitome of blasphemy. You know, I mean, all Lyran revered the great tree, and I mean, I don't know if they have other gods and stuff, but this tree was part of their spirituality and everything else. And, you know, Ahmed and Grunthor just basically rip open a door and jump down into the roots. I can understand why she was a bit perturbed, especially when they didn't warn her that this was going to happen.
Well, that, and too, she could feel it because she could feel the song of the tree. Then she could tell that it was hurting the tree. But she gives in and she goes with them. And we're going to spare talking very much about the time they spend on the route because it was very long.
They spend a very long time walking through the tree. Now, granted, it's such a big tree that you cannot see around the trunk and you cannot see how high up into the air it goes. So it is a very, very big tree. But they spend an awful long time going through the tree.
Well, they get on the root system, and what it is Ahmed is trying to find the Axis Mundi, which is basically the center line of the Earth. It goes right through the center of the Earth, so that they can go to one of the tree's root twins. Basically, these trees were all planted in places where time began. I'm still not entirely sure what that's all about, but whatever. Hopefully it's explained later in the books, and it's just something I've forgotten. Either that, or it's just one of those things that we're never going to know about. But all over the earth, these trees were planted in the places where time began, and they're all connected. So they're trying to come out on the other side of the world. Well, apparently there's also a giant snake sleeping in the center of the earth.
That's a problem.
Yeah, well, the Fedor, the demon, wants to wake up the snake and destroy the earth. And Ahmed wants to stop it. So he convinces Rhapsody to help him keep the snake asleep. That's about the only significant thing that happens while they're in the roots.
Right.
She plays a song and interferes with the snake's ability to hear its master's call so that the snake doesn't wake up and destroy the earth.
Which is an important thing.
Yeah, and I think it's even more important later on in book 2, but...
You don't want the snake to destroy the earth.
No, that's about the only important thing that happens while they're in the root system. Finally, they come out, that and what happens when they get to the center of the earth, the fire.
Yes.
As everyone knows, the center of the earth is fire.
Of course.
And apparently it's a very elemental fire, and Rhapsody, being a namer, somehow manages to find a way to cross through the fire, and she protects Ahmed and Grunthor as they cross through. But they're all changed on a very fundamental level after going through the fire.
Yes. For
one thing, all of their scars and injuries and everything are no longer there.
Right, they're cleansed in a way.
Yeah. And apparently Rhapsody goes from being quite pretty to, like, the most beautiful thing in the world.
And has absolutely no idea.
Yeah, see...
I know this is something that kept rubbing you wrong.
Yeah, that's when she really starts grating on my nerves, when they get out of the tree and all of these men are basically following along behind her with their tongues dragging the ground, and she's like, wow, I must be a freak.
Yeah, because people just keep staring at her because they are completely in awe. And she was like, wow, I've been living on the road and sleeping on the ground, and I must just be a mess. It's like, no, you are, like, drop dead gorgeous. Just accept it and move on.
Yeah. That really, it really annoyed me when she got into that mindset. But when they get out and start figuring out where they are and when they are, is when things really kind of start getting interesting. Because you find out that apparently they were crawling through this root system for 1,400 years.
Yeah. That's a really long time.
I believe it.
It felt like it at times.
Yeah. Well, part of it, too, is that they were also eating the roots as they were going through there, and that's what kept them alive, because these trees are apparently very tied into time and the way time flows and things of that nature.
Oh, okay.
So they come out, and they find out that Serendare, the island that they came from, has been destroyed. And when the Seren peoples arrived on the shores of this land that they're in now, they were called the Cumrians. And apparently the dude that led them there was all hung up on this phrase that he, like, wrote on everything there. And that's where they got the name of the Cumrians, because it was like, come we in peace, something, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And Rhapsody almost has a meltdown when she realizes that this dream she had while in the root system, that Serendare was destroyed, wasn't just a dream, that she has the ability to see these things. She's prescient. And it really bothers her a lot. And she finds this out when they find these priests, these nature priests.
Uh-huh.
And she spends a lot of time with this guy named Loron, who is apparently a lot older than we think he is.
Yes. That was surprising to me, because when you first meet these people, you assume they lead a very simple life. They're very connected to one of the trees and just connected with the people and the earth and everything. And she spends a good portion of her time with them, just soaking up as much knowledge as possible about, well, everything, all of their history, all of their lore, different types of medicines and herbs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so they just seem like the nicest, just plainest, most simple people. Except when you find out later that one of them is not so much.
Well, I see the whole time that I've read it before, but like I said, it's been so long I don't really remember very much. I don't trust Loron. There's just something about him that I'm just like,
Well, see, I thought that it was really strange when he was so welcoming and trying so hard to be helpful and just, doing everything possible. And at first I kind of wrote it off because, well, Rhapsody has become like this gorgeous creature who everybody just wants to fall down and worship practically. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I think it was, I didn't really see anything sinister about it or anything, but there was something that just seemed slightly off.
Yeah,
and you couldn't tell what it was.
Sit right.
Yeah.
Well, that and the fact that he said he could tell by her voice that she was a namer, and she's like, you can't, that's not possible. You can't tell someone is a namer just from listening to them talk.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's, they find out that when the Saren sailed from their homeland and came there, that the first person that arrived met the dragon that had control of those lands, and she changed herself into a human, and she fell in love with him, and he said, well, I'll bring my people back. I'll leave this with you as a memento. It was some kind of candle. It was a mixture of fire and water that shouldn't, I don't know. Anyway, he doesn't come back. He gets, his ship gets sunk, and he dies, and she thinks he's abandoned her, so she leaves her 3 children there for these people to find, and she goes off to pout, apparently. Anyway, all of these ancient Saren people show up and build this into a, flourishing land or whatever. Well, come to find out, apparently Loron was around when all of this was happening. Well, not long after that. He's been around a while.
Right.
Well, and Ahmed decides that there's this area, Canrif, which used to be the seat of the Qumran government. That's where, what's his face? I can't remember names for anything.
Which one?
The king that brought them all there and settled there, that married the Anwin.
Was it Gwilliam?
William, yeah.
Yeah.
His kingdom, the seat of his kingdom was in Canrif. Well, it was taken over by the Firbolg. And when Ahmed figures this out, he decides he's going to make himself king of the Firbolg. So they end up going to Canrif and finding all of this stuff, and he takes over. And along the way, they meet Stephen of Navarne. I think that was the place.
Yes.
And they start finding out more and more about what happened and about the ancient Saren and the Qumrans. And apparently the original Qumrans that landed there don't age and can't die.
Right.
Something about crossing the prime meridian and the way time affected them and everything, they can't die. They have these exceptionally long lifespans. And apparently a lot of them are still alive, they're just in hiding. And I don't know, there's a lot of stuff. There's just a lot of information in this book, but when it's, a nearly a 700-page book, there's a lot going on.
Well, yeah. But this does bring up another complaint I had. I don't want to sound like I didn't like the book. I did like it. It took me a long time to get into it. But during the whole trip through the tree, and even before then, when we're talking about Ahmed, he just seems like he's very reserved. He doesn't talk about anything really. We still don't know that much about his life, except that he was basically enslaved by this demon, but he's not anymore. And so he's reserved to the point of just being obnoxious about it, and then all of a sudden he wants to be king. And it was like his whole personality changed as soon as he heard about the Firbolg and I guess their status in this new century that they were in. And it seemed like it was completely out of character for him to do that. he was always kind of sitting back in the shadows and kind of always in hiding, and it never really seemed like he wanted anything different. And yet now he's, king of the new land. I don't remember what it was. It used to be Canriff, and now it's something that starts.
Lord.
Yeah, what you said. I could never figure out how to pronounce it.
I'm just guessing.
Okay, but it just bothered me that he made that drastic of a change.
Well,
without having something else happen.
Well, see, that's the thing. I think it can partially be explained by, one, when she renamed him, she kind of changed his nature, and two, when he passed through the fire changed him a lot too.
Yeah, but even after he went through the fire, I mean, it wasn't like an instantaneous thing. It was all of a sudden, they were out of the fire for a long time, and then they all of a sudden showed up, and now he's going to be king. I don't know. I loved the idea of having this whole civilization that was underneath the mountains.
Yeah.
And all of the things that they kept discovering underneath the mountains. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, the history and everything. When all of the history of what had happened starts coming together is when it gets kind of fascinating. But yeah, I mean, it was a little out of character for him, and I think Rhapsody even makes a comment to that effect at some point.
Yeah, like she says, I think she says something about being surprised that he's being so ambitious.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. It was because before he didn't seem like he was ambitious at all, and maybe that's because when he was enslaved to the demon, he really wasn't in charge of his own destiny. He was kind of forced to do whatever this other person or demon wanted.
Yeah.
But he was never really that, I don't want to say aggressive, that's the wrong word for it, but all of a sudden he was just like driven for this one goal to become king and unite the Firbolg and everything else, whereas before he was just kind of this drifter.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But it bugged me a little bit.
But yeah, this is also when Rhapsody starts really noticing the way people look at her. Like when she passes when she walks down the street of a town, it's just, I mean, people, well, she causes a wreck, these two carts to run into each other in the middle of a city.
Well, and right when that happened, she had also made this, well, not made, but this one merchant was like falling over himself trying to get her to take a pair of earrings.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, I don't have any money. I don't want to buy them. He's like, no, this is a gift. Please take them. And she's like, okay. That's weird.
She thinks the way people are looking at her is fear. Somehow she has got it in her head that when these people look at her and stop talking and are just taken aback, that it's because she's hideous.
Yeah, because of something that happened when she passed through the fire, that it must have done something horrible to her appearance. In fact, the complete opposite is true.
Yeah, and it just really annoys me because that's just not realistic at all. I mean, surely at some point she has passed a mirror.
Or any sort of reflective surface.
Yeah. I mean, come on. And then, when they're in the market, this is after they went to the House of Remembrance and saved it, and she saved the sapling from the great tree of Serendare because it was poisoned, and they've rescued all these kids and given them back to Stephen, except for Jo, who Rhapsody adopts as her sister, because she adopts every child she comes along for some reason.
She has a thing for that.
Yeah, well, she adopts Stephen's kids as her grandchildren.
Yeah. She just loves children.
One of whom was named Gwydion, and he was named after the Gwydion that got sent back in time.
Yes.
Because that Gwydion was Stephen's best friend, and you think Gwydion is dead. And then when they're in the city, this is when Jo is trying to pick somebody's pocket. She comes across Ash, and she goes to pick his pocket. Now, Ash is very hard to see because he's wrapped in a cloak of mist that hides him, and he never reveals his face. And part of it is because he has a sword. Well, I forgot to mention Rhapsody finding the sword when they came out of the tree. she finds a sword that's on fire. It's called the Daystar Clarion. That's really all you know about the sword.
Yeah.
Well,
Except it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's a very impressive sword.
Yeah.
Ash has a sword called Kiersdark, which is kind of the opposite of the Daystar Clarion because its power is in water instead of fire. And the sword is part of what gives him the ability to cloak himself the way he does. Well, Jo sees him, and Jo decides she's going to pick his pocket. But she misses and grabs something that's not his money bag.
This part was funny.
It was so hilarious. She grabs basically his manhood, and he grabs her hand and threatens to cut it off. So Rhapsody comes up and threatens to cut his hand off. And it was just really funny. And apparently Jo is now completely smitten with Ash. But Ash is completely smitten with Rhapsody, as is every other man in this book.
Yes.
And anyway, he buys them lunch, and it's like hatred at first sight for Ahmed. I mean, he hates Ash with the passion of 1,000 fiery suns.
He does.
That's just the only way I can describe it. And at some point, Rhapsody, tells him that he should come visit them in Canrith. Well, after they get there and set up shop and basically bully all of the neighboring kingdoms into signing a peace treaty, Ash shows up, and I don't think you've read this part of the book. I think
this is the part he has not come to their new home yet.
Well, Rhapsody is feeling exceptionally depressed, and she goes outside into the cauldron, and she's running around with her eyes closed, and Ash sees her, and she comes across Ash, and she almost kills him, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "You invited me." So he ends up staying there for a while, and the whole time he's like driven to distraction, literally, by Rhapsody. Like the night she shows him to his room where he's going to stay, like he has this fantasy that completely wipes out reality, that she walks in and takes her clothes off and basically wants to have her way with him. And then she really says something, and he comes back to himself, and she's standing there looking at him like there's something wrong with him. She's just like, okay. And I mean, like, he can't understand why he is so attracted to her. And I told you why, but I don't think I'm going to reveal that on here. I'm going to let them figure that out for themselves.
Yeah.
There's a reason that neither he nor Rhapsody understand as to why he is so attracted to her. And basically, where the book ends is not really an ending. It's one of those that just sort of stops.
Uh-huh.
When Ash shows up, they find something. They find this dagger that's made from a dragon claw. And it's the dragon, Elensinos, that originally let the Cumrians come to that land. And Rhapsody freaks out. She's like, oh, she's going to want it back. It's her claw, and now that it's been revealed to the air, she's going to be able to smell it. We have to return it, or she's going to come kill us all.
It's a valid fear, I would say.
Yes. And Rhapsody's like, I'm the one that has to take it. She's like, Ahmed, you can't leave. Grunther can't either. I'm the one that has to take it. And Ahmed's like, but you don't even know where her lair is. And Ash is like, I do. So basically, against Ahmed's violent protests, she leaves with Ash to go return this claw to the dragon. And where it ends is her and Ash are walking away from Canrith. They are set out on their journey. And it stops there, and we get another scene with Meridian, the time...
Oh, the guy from the beginning. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. The time editor. We meet him again because the thread of time that he is watching... See, basically, this whole book is... He is watching the thread of time that is telling this story.
Okay.
From far, far into the future. He is watching this thread of time. That's the story we are getting, is the thread of time that he is watching. The film breaks, and that's where it stops. That's why it stops the way it does, because the thread of time that he is watching breaks, and he can't fix it.
Oh, great. That doesn't sound like that's good.
No, not really. And that's where book 2 picks up, is Meridian trying to find a way to get back into being able to see what Rhapsody's doing. Because basically, the big bad, the Fedor demon, the one that had control of Ahmed was destroyed. But there is another one that somehow made it to the new world, and this demon has to have a host. They don't have a corporeal form. It has to have a host, and a lot of times the host is not even aware that it's hosting this demon.
Right. Yeah, Ahmed, that was one thing that Ahmed was really upset about with Rhapsody and her way of adopting everybody, and then also he thought she was way too trusting, because he was like, no, you don't understand. There is no way possible for you to be able to tell when these people are possessed, and they may not even know, so it's not like they're even going to lie to you when they try and tell you who they are. They have no idea. So that makes them extra dangerous, because there is no way to detect them at all. And you can't keep trusting everybody. And I think basically she's just like, well, I can't live like that. So I'm going to keep trusting people, and that's your issue, not mine, kind of a attitude.
Right.
Which, of course, Ahmed loves, right?
No, yeah. But, yeah, so, that's kind of the framework for the entire story. Is the story is being told as, this is the thread of time that Meridian is watching. And where Meridian is watching from is the future where the Earth was destroyed. And basically he's trying to fix it.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. But, I mean, if you can get past the boring part going through the tree and get into the actual meat of the story where it picks up, it's a really good series. And I love Ash, and I love the dynamic between him and Ahmed, and especially after they get back that's in book 2. So I'm not really going to talk about that too much.
Okay. I have a question.
Okay.
Because it was something that I could not tell if it was there or not, if I was just reading something into it, because I do that with books. I'll kind of like, I kind of sort of want this to happen, so I start seeing hints,
signs,
that may or may not actually be there. Does Ahmed have feelings for Rhapsody?
No.
Okay. Because I kept wondering if they'd been spending so much time together, and just a couple of things here and there, just different ways that he acted or different things that he did. It was just like, No,
what him and Rhapsody is more of a brother-sister relationship.
Okay, so it does stay that way.
Yeah, okay. It stays that way. Especially after you figure out who Ash really is.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I knew that there wasn't going to be a future for them, but just especially with how protective he became when Ash was there.
Yeah.
And how he really, really hated him. It seemed less of him being protective and more of him saying, she's mine, get away from her.
Yeah, it's more, I think that actually comes up in book 2, maybe.
Okay.
And Rhapsody confronts him about it, and it's just a brother-sister thing.
Okay. He was like, so it's more like, hey, you said that I was your brother, and so that's my job to look after you.
Yeah.
Okay.
A combination of that and the fact that he trusts no one ever.
Except for two people, he said. He said he trusts 2 people.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing I'm guessing the other one's Grunthor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely, worth reading the rest of it if you enjoyed the second half of the book. Just kind of try to not worry about how the first half, because I'm pretty sure there's no more of those long, boring parts. I don't know. I'll report back after I finish Prophecy and let you know if there's any long, boring parts in it.
Well, it wasn't even so much the long, boring part. I mean, that was very long, and most of it was a little boring. But I just started getting, even when they came out of the tree and they were on the other side, I just started getting a little bit confused.
Yeah, like I said,
there's a lot. There is a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of people, and
a lot of it is not explained until later on.
Yeah, and I kind of got that impression, but at the same time, it was like I need something more in order to follow along, because there's just so much of it, and it's all thrown at you really, really fast with little to no explanation.
Like, one of the things that they don't explain until later is when Rhapsody finds Daystar Clarion, when they get out and they start finding out things and they find out about Oleandra, she was the Ilia Chen Va'ar. That's not explained. What is the Ilia Chen Va'ar and what does it have to do with the Daystar Clarion? You know, how does this tie into anything? That's explained later on. And I'm like, if you're not going to explain it now, why don't you just wait till later to mention it?
Yeah, that's a pet peeve I have when authors do that. It's just, and I know that it's part of world building, and especially with fantasy and science fiction to a lesser degree, but when they just bring up something and just kind of throw it out there and then never explain it, that's when a book will start to lose my interest because I'll get confused. And
Yeah.
especially with the amount of books that I read, and I think I had at one point 4 different ones going on, I need things to be explained, and I need because otherwise I'm not going to follow it, and it's not because I don't want to, and it's not because I'm not used to reading a lot. I mean, I was an English major in college, for goodness sakes, but it's just if you just keep throwing things out and you don't tell me anything about them, I'm going to lose interest really, really fast.
Yeah,
and I think that was a big problem with a lot of stuff in this book.
Yeah, and I know, world building is necessary, and you have to do it, and it's something you need to do. But do we really have to take 300 pages of a 600-page book for that?
No. I would say no.
I mean, that's bordering on the insanity that is Robert Jordan. I know there are people out there who love those books, and you have my respect that you can read those things. I couldn't do it. There's so much in there. Those are like that. There's so much in there that you don't get an explanation for until 4 books down the road.
Yeah, and I've never read those.
Yeah. If you had it, look, if Rhapsody confused you because of the way it was doing it, don't try to read Robert Jordan, because no. Like, they tell you in the first book that Randall Thor is the Dragon Reborn. I spent the first 4 books wondering what in the hell that meant, because they didn't explain it. I'm like, okay, he's the Dragon Reborn. Why is this a big deal? Why is this so important?
Yeah, see, there's ways that you can make a really, really rich and intricate fantasy story world without making it confusing. And if you want a good example of that, the Song of Ice and Fire books by George R.R. Martin. And he does it extremely well, and I was never even remotely confused for a second. Now, I don't want it to sound like I get confused by books a lot, because it's only a couple of them here and there that just when they don't explain things and when they just leave things out. But pretty much everybody has heard of at least the first of the George R.R. Martin books, because it's a Game of Thrones, which was the really popular television show now on HBO, and they're doing the second one now, I think, or maybe it's already out. I don't know. I don't have HBO, so I haven't had a chance to watch it. I've heard it's good, but if you want to talk about a story world that has a ton of characters and all the different ways that they're connected and the different ways that they have alliances and the different threats that are coming from the north and everything else, it's complicated and it's rich and it's really, really good. Have you read those?
No, they're on my list of things I'm going to read one day.
Yeah, that's one. It's really, really, really good. And I got the first book because I had never even really heard of them, and I got the first book for a Christmas present a couple years ago, and I was hooked like right away. So, but see, that's the right way to do it. And when I finished, now it's not a complete series yet, he's still working on them, but when I finished the ones that had been published, I did go back and read the first one again, and it wasn't because things had to be explained. It was because there was a lot of politics that was going back and forth, and once you get to like book 4, book 5 just came out. I don't have that one, but I have 1 through 4. and you know who the characters are a little bit more, so it was neat going back to the first one and seeing what those people were doing, how everything was setting up, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I know who that person is, and you didn't think that he was important, or you didn't think that he was a threat, but turns out he really was, and now you see, oh, I see how he's setting that up there. Okay. So, but that's the way to do it right. Apparently Robert Jordan does it wrong, and I'm going to say that Elizabeth Hayden's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, she gets better.
Okay.
If she hadn't got better, I never would have been able to finish the series. And I did read all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Robert Jordan, I gave up on book 4. But that was a combination of his world-building skills and the fact that Randall Thor is the most annoying protagonist I've ever read, ever. I mentioned this in one of our earlier episodes. I would literally get so frustrated that I would throw those books across the room.
Yeah, wasn't that on our most frustrating characters episode?
Possibly. It was one of the early ones we did, one of our early episodes. The name of the episode is Throwing Books Across the Room. But, yeah, I would literally get so irritated at Rand and at the females in those books that I would physically throw them across my room. Granted, at the time, my bedroom was quite small, but those books were quite large. They can do some damage. I mean, they're like, the entire series is the size of Rhapsody or bigger, you know. So they were massive, and I'm just like, you know what? This is making me crazy. I can't do this. So I stopped. I did actually make it through all of the Symphony of Ages books that she's written anyway. So it gets better. She gets better at everything, and it kind of becomes a lot more cohesive.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm going to say that probably for right now, I don't have plans to keep reading the series.
Yeah.
I probably will pick it up again at some point.
I think maybe if you wait a while and then read Rhapsody again, it'll make a little more sense.
Yeah.
And you can skip all that business going through the tree. I know what happens here. I'm just going to skip to the good part.
Right.
That maybe it would be easier to finish out the series.
That's possible. Yeah. And I think eventually I do want to finish it. It's not going to happen right now.
Yeah, you got all those other things to read.
Well, and plus I have a bunch of other series that I'm trying to finish.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to do that, then I want to, like you said, I need to set this aside for a while and then come back to it. And now that I know a little bit more, I might do better with it.
Yeah, well, you know, just don't do like I did and put it aside for 7 years.
Who knows? The amount of books I have waiting to be read, it might take me that long.
Well, this is true. Hopefully now that I have gotten past Rhapsody, and I did start Prophecy, but I can take my time with that one, and I'm not trying to get it read by a certain date. I'm going to try to pick back up on my goal of reading some of the stuff that I haven't read, that I own, and I need to do that. I need to read. This is another series that, you know, a lot of fantasy fans, they know about it. A lot of them have read it. It's one of those, if you read fantasy and science fiction, you need to have at least attempted to read this series, and that's Piers Anthony's Xanth books.
Uh-huh.
I have probably 20 of them. I read the first one years and years and years ago, and I never read any further than that. So my goal is to start there on my shelf, and it helps that, you know, my shelf is alphabetized by author's last name, and Piers Anthony is the first thing on the shelf. I need to read those and decide if I like them enough to keep them, if I might read them again one day, and if not, I can take them to McKay and clear out a lot of room on my shelf. So that's kind of my goal now that I'm past Rhapsody, because as far as I know, other than the Belgariad and our book of the month at the tavern, we don't really have any plans to do specific books like that I'm going to have to hunt up and try to read in a short time span.
No, and I think all of the ones that we're going to be reading, you have copies of, so
yeah.
You should be good for a while. I still need to track down A Discovery of Witches. I have no idea what it is.
See, I have it, but it's at Holly's where it's been for, 2 years because she said she was going to read it. So I'm going to have to get that back so I can, read it again. And although we did get a suggestion on the tavern, the thread I posted, the podcast announcement that we were going to be doing the Eddings stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I made a couple posts, and I had said something about next Thursday, and Vector commented and said, Thursday next seems to be playing a very large role in your podcasting plans. Are you perhaps going to discuss those books? And I was like, that is something that had not even occurred to me. I don't know if you've read those. The Jasper Ford.
I have not. Is that the one that it starts with the air affair?
Yes.
I have not, but I have heard about them and I want to read them.
And it occurred to me to bring that up, that we might want to, do the first book at some point. I've read them. I've got all but the newest one. They're really good, and being a literature geek like you are, you'll probably really like them.
Okay. Well, I would definitely be interested in doing that at some point.
Yep, at some point. But, hey, we actually have the next month and a half planned out, which is unusual for us.
Well, it helps that we're doing a whole slew of Eddings books, and then we'll have 2 Book of the Month episodes coming up after that, because we won't actually talk about the Book of the Month for April until after April.
Yeah, first week of May.
Yeah, because of the Eddings-palooza.
Yes. But can I just say I'm ridiculously excited about that, because I love the book so much.
It's going to be fun.
It really is. I mean, it's been a long time since we've had any really hardcore Eddings discussion.
Well, especially getting more people from the tavern involved. I think that it's going to be a really good time. So I'm glad that Marita's going to join us. Yes. If we can get that sorted out.
Yeah, if she can find her microphone.
Yeah.
Because, of course, she said before that she has a lot of problems understanding other accents sometimes.
Uh-huh.
But she said she started listening to us and she doesn't have any problem understanding us. So.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yes. And it'll be fun for our listeners, because she was born in New Zealand and she lives in Australia. So it's going to add another dynamic accent to our podcast.
So another flavor, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably going to do it for this episode.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this book for a good long while, and a couple other things too. So once again, starting next week is our Eddings-palooza, our celebration of all things Belgariad. So find a copy of Pawn of Prophecy and join us next week. That's when we will be starting that. We are still, even though we do have the next probably month and a half or so planned out, we still are looking for some more topic suggestions and book recommendations. So Please send anything you'd like us to talk about. Send that to either our email, which is bibliophiles.podcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter, and we are at BibAnonPodcast. And you can also comment at our official website, which is at www.bibliophiles-anonymous.com. And as we said before, you can find us at the Malorian Tavern. And again, the discussion post for Rhapsody is up, and we are discussing it. So head on over there if you have read or want to read Rhapsody and join in the conversation. And once again, that web address is www.maltavern.com.
We look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, so thanks for listening, and we will see you next week for Eddings-palooza.
Yay!
Bye.
Bye.